Good morning. I'm Bridget Flood, and I hope you're enjoying Bishop Shanahan's carols and lessons. I invite you now to have a fresh, spiritual way of thinking as we consider what the birth of Jesus means. Imagine, for a moment, a visitor coming from a foreign country to Washington, D.C., saying that he was a diplomat. Naturally, the government would ask him for his passport and other documents, just to be sure that he, in fact, represented a certain government. Well, if such proofs of identity are asked of other countries, shouldn't we do the same with messengers who claim to have come from God? For example, Socrates had no one to foretell his birth. Buddha had no one to pre-announce him. Confucius never had the name of his mother and birthplace recorded. But Jesus Christ is different. Because of the Old Testament prophecies, things such as where he was to be born, who his mother would be, how he would die, and that he would rise, were things that were not unexpected. But there's something else we should find fascinating about Jesus. And to explain this, I'm going to turn to Caitlin and Nick.
Thanks, Bridget. One of the more curious passages in the Bible is that of the genealogy of Jesus. It can be found at the beginning of the Gospel of St. Matthew. St. Matthew writes about the family tree of Jesus, and the style of writing St. Matthew uses has a rhythm all its own. Abraham became the father of Isaac. Isaac became the father of Jacob. Jacob became the father of Judah. Many of the people mentioned are unfamiliar to us, and many of their names seem impossible to pronounce. Let's be honest. To us, it seems tedious
and boring.
But to a Jewish person, this was the most natural and most interesting way to begin the story of someone's life. It's even more interesting when we study of some of these people who are actually in Jesus' family tree. Jacob, who was a selfish wimp, Salmon, who married a prostitute, Ruth, a little pagan girl, Abijah, an evil king, and Bathsheba, an adulteress. The family tree of Jesus reminds us that with Jesus, all barriers are brought down. The barriers between Jews and Gentiles, the barriers between men and women, and the barriers between sinners and saints. By naming such people, St. Matthew is reminding us that Jesus came to call sinners, not the righteous. But there's something else about this passage that should get our attention.
What's that?
The genealogy of Jesus is arranged in 3 sections, and each section contains 14 generations. Each section tells of the different stages of the history of Israel. The first section begins with Abraham and ends with the great King David. It reminds us that Israel started out small, but rose to greatness under the leadership of King David. The second section begins with King David and ends with the Babylonian exile. It reminds us that Israel fell. As great as it had once been, it took a horrible tumble right into the hands of their enemies.
Cool.
But there's more, Nick. Much more. The third section's the best. It takes us from the low point in Israel's history all the way up to the birth of Jesus. And so, when we look at the whole thing, it's an echo of everyone's life. We're destined for greatness, but we fall and lose our greatness, and then we're redeemed by Christ.
So can we say that it's kind of like this? St. Matthew shows us the royalty of kingship gained, the tragedy of freedom lost, and the glory of liberty restored?
Whoa, good job, you got it. The family tree of Jesus is the story of humanity. It's the story of each person. It's the story of God's love and mercy. Well, on behalf of Nick, we hope you enjoy what's left of carols and lessons, and that you have a very Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Caitlin. Back Nick too. Though his divine nature was from eternity, Jesus' human nature had a Jewish background. The blood that flowed in his veins was from the royal house of David and coursed through his mother, who was the poorest of the poor. But in a sense, you too are part of the family tree of Jesus, because you too, in your own way, are making the coming of Christ possible. Just as he once came to Bethlehem, You make him come into the world by the way you live your life. His family tree reveals many blots and imperfections. As such, it reveals that Jesus did not come for the perfect, and he did not come to make life easy. Instead, he came for the imperfect, and he came to make us great. Merry Christmas, everyone.